Hi, I'm Hallie, and I want to welcome you to the Odd Life Podcast. That's spelled AWED, which stands for Awake, Well, and Empowered. In this space, you will hear inspirational stories, candid and heartfelt conversations, as well as advice from experts, all with the intention of helping women like you live odd AF. Because I believe the more of us that live awake, well, and empowered, the better this world will be. So thank you for being here and welcome to your odd life. Welcome back to another episode of the Odd Life Podcast. I'm your host, Hallie. As you saw in the intro, I am very thrilled for you to meet another amazing woman that I have met in the last few months. Her name is Chrissy Powers, and Chrissy is a trauma therapist and embodiment coach. And we talked all about her own story, how she became a trauma therapist, her own healing journey that she went through. We get into her own healing journey. We get into how she became a therapist, how she coaches women, and she gives us some tips and ideas of how to start your own embodiment work at home. And then we talk about some books and podcasts she recommends, what she listens to. And then we get into some of her retreat work and talk about one of her recent retreats. They went to France, and we talk all about what that experience was like and what you can expect going on her future retreats. So I cannot wait for you to meet her. She's fantastic. I've listed in the show notes all the places you can find and connect with her. And if you want to be coached by her, where you can go for that as well. So here she is, my guest, Chrissy Powers. Welcome, Chrissy. Thank you for coming to the podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here. Yeah, you are somebody that I met through an individual that, of course, I follow on social media, and I had to meet you because of the recent retreat you went on. And so we'll get into all that here in a little bit, but please tell our audience who you are, what you do, whatever you want to throw in there.
Thank you so much for having me and just reaching out. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a women's empowerment coach and embodiment coach. Would love to branch out into men too, so I'm trying not to pigeonhole myself, but I love doing divine feminine work with women, which sometimes goes into healing from religious trauma and sexual abuse and eating disorders and all of that stuff. So I see a lot of women in my practice. I used to be a mommy blogger online. Mm-hmm. So that's how I grew my following. And then in the last probably 3 years, I shifted my content to what I do in my private practice and my work with women. And then recently I have branched out into offering divine feminine retreats. And that is one of the things that lights me up the most in this world, is connecting women as sisters and doing this healing work together. Because just like you said before we pushed record, was I also believe that when women heal together, we heal the world.
I think the healing journeys, I know that everyone talks about don't let trauma bonds, be the what connect you. But at the same time, it is a lot of, we can resonate with each other's stories. We can feel each other's pain, and that brings empathy, and that brings a lot of other emotions to the table that I think it's important for us to have. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It should be the only thing. But I think it's a lot of times where a lot of relationships start is because of shared experiences and trauma. Is that what you see a lot of times in your practice? Just people, is that something you try and work on healing in your work to get past, that holding on to the trauma? You see a lot of that?
Definitely. And that's why I utilize embodiment work and somatic therapy and experiential therapy, which is very much what I do on my women's retreats to help us to release trauma. So with my work with women, especially in my coaching program, we work on identifying the trauma and the messages that we got from the trauma, because we all have a narrative or a story we tell ourselves about ourselves in the world. And oftentimes in adulthood, we realize that the stories that we've been telling ourselves and the ways that we've been coping with that don't work for us anymore. So when we identify that trauma and we utilize our bodies, we can actually trust our body to help us release that trauma and change the narrative going forward so that we can live our fullest, best, juiciest life.
And so tell me, you mentioned a couple different things. You mentioned sexual trauma, abuse. You mentioned something I don't ever hear that much about is the religious kind of
Yeah.
programming, trauma, things of that nature.
Mhm.
Maybe if you could dive in just a quick, like where this came up for you as far as why this direction with your practice. Was it something you had to go through as a young person
Yeah.
and then eventually became your focus? Or tell me about your own
Yeah.
maybe healing journey and trauma that you've had to go through and where all this, where your
Good
focus came from.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Yes, I grew up in evangelical Christianity, which was more like a high control religion
Hmm.
and very authoritarian in the home. I had loving parents, still have really good relationship with them. And parts of that experience of growing up in a small church were really good and healthy, and the community and the people that still love me today from that was good. But some of the messages I received from that theology didn't work for me. And at a young age, I kind of knew it didn't work for me, but my safety was tied to my acceptance and belonging within that system. So I did what I had to do in order to thrive and receive that love and belonging, which was to be the perfect good girl.
Mm.
So the perfect good girl, didn't cuss, didn't drink, didn't have sex before she was married, brought people to church or to Christ. And I felt responsible for people's salvation, their eternal afterlife. And that was a lot of pressure to put on a child, especially a sensitive child. My mom and dad had no clue, but that was me internalizing all of that, especially at a young age, was really hard on my system. And then I saw that manifest in anxiety, panic attacks, and eating disorder in college. And when I became a mother, I realized I didn't want to live the way that I was living anymore. I didn't want to feel locked up in my body. I didn't want to have random panic attacks. Like it was just, um, for years I sort of gaslit myself and said, this is just anxiety. This is just runs in my family. I should just, medicate myself. And then I eventually sort of woke up to like, maybe this isn't aligning with me.
Hmm.
Maybe I actually don't believe being homosexual is bad. Maybe I do, maybe my beliefs, and I always knew women weren't represented well within that system. And I used to debate with my dad at dinner time because I was a pastor's daughter.
Sure.
And I would say, why can't I go up and speak? Why can't we have this thing called communion, which is one of the most holy things or sacred things like we actually do as a group of Christians, is to remember Christ and what he did for us on the cross. And they always would invite the men to come forward and speak and share what Christ was doing
Mm.
in their life, but they never invited the women. And I asked why. I think I was like 10, and I said, why can't I do that? Jesus Christ is moving in my life, and I feel God, and I feel the presence of the divine. And the answer that was given to me was, because if you did, you would take over the church.
Oh
And
my.
I was like, how? Really?
Huh.
So my
Yeah.
first messages as a woman was that if I use my voice, I will destroy something. And then once I grew older and got into puberty, the message even more that was put on me was, you're dangerous and your body is dangerous. So you need to cover up because you are a stumbling block for men.
Mm.
So my whole experience, like developing as a woman, was I better be perfect and I better be good and I shouldn't want to speak and use my voice. I need to be quiet and meek, but that's not who I am as a person at all.
Sure.
Like I have a voice and I want to use that voice and I want to help women and men and I want to be seen and I want to enjoy my body. I don't want to hide her. But that for me and that framework didn't work for me. And that
Yeah.
manifested, like I said, in some disordered thinking, disordered eating, um, and panic attacks. And so my body woke me up
Yeah.
to the fact that I wasn't living in authenticity with what I actually believe and who I am.
Yeah.
And so I left our church in 2020, like a lot of people did. It was like the gift that a lot of us didn't know we were getting was that
Absolutely.
space and time to question, like, you know, does that still work for me? Or can I still attend a service or a church that doesn't let women have the same role as a man, or pay her the same because she's a woman, or affirm the LGBTQ community? And it was a really good time away, and to really realize that, like, my faith doesn't have to be confined to that small box anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And it wasn't easy, and it was really, really hard. I had to have, I was in therapy with a therapist that understood what's called deconstruction.
Sure.
And so I felt safe within her and I's work together, but it was really scary and it was really hard. But I saw a lot of fruit come out of that time for me. And that's what I
Absolutely.
bring to my work with women that are also going
Yeah.
through that process.
So how long have you been a therapist?
Oh, I think since 2010.
So your own healing journey, did that shift then what you focused on? Obviously you've added
Yeah.
some things too. Where did you start with your therapy? What it was the focus, or
Yeah.
just in general, like whatever people came with you to you with, or was there something
Yeah.
specific you wanted to work on back then?
Yeah. I started with eating disorders because that's
Okay.
what got me into healing as well. Was
Okay.
having a therapist who had recovered from an eating disorder. So I thought, okay, if I can recover, then I could also help someone.
Yeah.
And so I worked in a treatment center and did what's called dual diagnosis. And so that's like you're dealing with people that have eating disorders and drug addictions and something like bipolar disorder. So
Mm.
it was really acute people, really people that, really hard cases. And then as an intern, that's what you are for like the first 3 years of being a therapist until you get licensed. I saw a lot of people. I saw a lot of families. I saw a lot of kids. I saw couples. So I did a lot of different work.
Got it.
And then really fell into working with women specifically in this capacity for the last probably 5-ish years.
And how has this work that you're doing now, especially with women, how has it affected you as a mother? How has it changed? Has it changed you as a mother? I mean, how you've got three
Yeah.
kids?
I have 3 kids. Yeah. Two
How
boys
old
and a
are they?
girl.
Okay.
They're 11, 7, and 4.
Since your background in the church, being submissive and whatever that role is as
Mm-hmm.
a woman, as a wife, mother, whatever, how did you work through
Mm-hmm.
that as a
Yeah.
mom? The role, the roles were
Mm-hmm.
given versus or what's expected of you versus how you wanted to live. Some work that you had to do there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I knew as a mom I wanted to be home with my kids when they were babies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so actually, be, being a mommy blogger was a huge gift because I could write about motherhood through the lens of psychology or what I knew as a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, and I could
Mm-hmm.
also take the time to be with them. Like I was seeing a lot of kids doing play therapy, and I would do it at night when my husband would come home from work. So my focus wasn't growing like a business or a practice. It was just like getting my hours and getting experience. And then there was one time I think I was pregnant with my third baby, and I just thought, I am being so intentional with this child that I'm working with. And I want to, but I need to do that for my own kids. So I took
Mm-hmm.
that as like a sign to say, I can pause right now for this. And I focused fully on like um, mommy blogging and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when 2020 happened, my husband was building a house for us and wasn't working. So I ended up going back to work and
Sure.
starting my practice again. And it was the best thing for me because at that time I was so burnt out on influencing and feeling inauthentic with that,
Mm-hmm.
that I really had to let it go. And my mental health was so much better because of it. So,
Yeah.
in terms of mothering now and letting go of some of those things from my family of origin, it actually was a beautiful process. Like slowly though, it wasn't like a one big talk I had with my parents. It was kind of like little bite sizes of, hey, we're doing some things differently. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just can, these things aren't things that we're telling our kids right now. And my dad likes to come down when he visits and bring us
Mm-hmm.
hymnal songbook. And it's, God bless his soul, like he really wants to connect with my kids. And it's a lot of the songs he sang to us growing up, and some of them are terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was so sweet last time he was at our house. He said, okay, here's the songbook. I want you to cross out the songs that are not okay to sing.
Oh,
And that meant so much to me, because I meant
yeah.
like, wow, he hears me, and it
Yeah.
might be uncomfortable for him. I know it's uncomfortable for him, but he honors the process of me choosing what's right for me and my family. So I would
Absolutely.
cross all those songs, and I'm like, nope, we're not going to sing about hell. Nope, we're not going to
Yeah. Yeah.
sing
That's
about
huge
blood.
though. You
Yeah.
think about that. That's really a huge growth moment for him too, because he's valuing your relationship more than he's valuing his strict belief in
Yeah.
that situation. He knows he's got to compromise in order to have a relationship with you, probably. So that's
Yeah.
amazing, because that normally
Doesn't
doesn't always
normally doesn't.
happen.
That's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unusual.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, in terms of just the work that I do, I try as best as I can to like also bring it to our family, um, and normalize mental health,
Yeah.
and normalize moving our bodies and letting ourselves, like, release our anger in a healthy way and things like that. So me and
Yeah.
my husband are both passionate about that, while also teaching our kids a little bit of the things that we did grow up with that we love. Like, we do pray at dinner, and we do talk
Hmm.
about how great Jesus was, and we do talk about being kind and, loving and empathic to people, and what that looks like on this earth, and how much our kids are loved by God. And so we have that, still as like the foundation of,
Sure.
I would say, our family, but we don't necessarily go to church every Sunday.
Yeah. It's about your full expression as a human, and what that looks like still within the framework of Christianity, right? Not having these
Yeah.
other roles you have like you had, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's probably a huge weight off of your shoulders as well as a parent. Like, you don't have to do what you were,
Yeah.
taught and what you were shown. And I think that's the hardest part about sometimes when we get to this adult spot and we're now in charge of kids, is we don't realize how much was just programming that we didn't even question.
Mm.
And now as we're older, we're like, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you this question is, what are some things, like some trauma that we don't realize is actually trauma? It's just so freaking normalized in society that we
Mm.
don't even understand it. Like, I think there's a lot of things that we think, oh, that's just how we grew up in the 80s, 90s, whatever. And that's
Yeah.
not, and trauma, that's trauma regardless. And so
Mm-hmm.
are there some examples you can give us that maybe you see in your practice that people don't realize is
Yeah.
traumatic?
Yeah. I explain trauma to people as, it's the stuff that happens to you, because trauma can be different for each person. It's how your body responds to the things that
Ah,
happen to
yeah.
you in your life.
Yeah.
So for one person, maybe their parents divorcing was a good thing. For another, it might not have been. It might have
Sure.
been a huge trauma for them. It's how your body responds. So I also
Mm,
like to talk about trauma in two ways: as trauma A and trauma B. Trauma A is the
mm,
things that never should have happened to you, like death, divorce, disease, accidents, things like that, abuse. And then trauma B is the things that you should have gotten but didn't,
mm.
like proper attunement from a caregiver, understanding, the proper education, even sometimes. So, yeah, I see a lot of women, um, struggling with like relating to their bodies, or
Mhm.
purity culture, I would consider as a trauma. Purity culture is something within a lot of high control religions that is placed on women as like the gender role is, you are a woman, your highest goal is to get married and have children, and you have to remain, pure until you get married. And then when you get married, you're supposed to flip a switch and be like a sex kitten in the bedroom and please your husband whenever he wants you to
Sure.
please him. And so, being a stumbling block and covering your body and being modest was all part of that culture.
Mhm.
And your worthiness was tied up in being pure. So for me, that's a huge one I see in my work with women: is how do I even relate to my body now? And how
Yeah.
do I reclaim my sexuality as a woman? A lot of women I see have issues with connection to their womb or connection to their vulva or connection to like actually having really good sex because they've never had it. Because for us as women, our biggest sexual organ is our brain. And when you're conditioned to believe that that is bad for so long, the switch does not switch on when you're married.
Yeah.
It just, our brains don't work that way. So we have to decondition ourselves. We have to do embodiment practices to recondition ourselves to actually feel the pleasure that our bodies were made to feel. But that's a huge trauma I see, is that disconnect from sense of self and body. One of the biggest breaks to arousal is stress, obviously, and the disconnect with feeling safe within your body and knowing your body. So a lot of women are just afraid to open that and to say, how do I work on connecting back to my body? I don't even know where to begin. And that's where we begin the work, is like, okay, we start just simply right here, you know? And so it doesn't have to look scary, and it doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to sort of like be the other end of the pendulum where you're like, this fire goddess, scary person. No. And it doesn't have to be here, which is like the, you know, meek and modest woman that doesn't really have feeling. There's a balance. Like, as women, we get to feel it all. And like, we are just now learning that that is available to us, that that is actually how we are made as women, to be fierce and sexy. And then also, we can also be, you know, powerhouses in the boardroom, and like, you know, we get to be all of that. That's how we are made to be.
Yeah. And so do you feel like it's that disconnect with yourself? Because you mentioned earlier you weren't in alignment with yourself. Is that where you see most women get stuck? Is that because they're not finding out who they really are? And it's that stuckness. And I know I had felt that way years ago, but just not knowing, but I also didn't know who I was. But how do I find myself? Like, how do I find out who I am? What's the path? Because I think that's maybe where, okay, I'm stuck, and I recognize I'm stuck, but how do I move forward? Is there anything you can give as far as advice of getting that alignment back, or finding that alignment in the first place, so that way you can be more embodied and more into yourself and feeling like yourself?
Yeah. I always say the first step is just awareness and acceptance, like awareness that how you're living or feeling in your body isn't how you want to live or feel. And then from there, you can say, okay, I'm opening up my mind to the possibility that I could feel good in my body, or that I could reconnect to my body, that I could live differently. And so when you start sort of opening that possibility up, then you notice, like, what am I curious about? Am I curious about therapy? Do I want to do this with a coach? Or do I want to do this with a therapist? Do I have a lot of work I need to do to release first? Probably. And so working with someone is probably one of my best bits of advice. To don't do it alone. Or even open up to a friend that's trusted to say, I'm starting to feel this way. Have you ever felt this way? And then, like, if you have, like, do you know any therapists, or do you know anybody that, you know, is doing this work? And then, so that sort of expands your mind too. And then books and podcasts. Like, we have so much free resources now available to us through books and podcasts, that you can start to listen to the stories of other people, so that you feel less alone, so that you can continue to give yourself permission to do the work that you need to do. And I would just start there. I would start also with creating like a meditation practice or breathwork practice to actually slow down and to feel what you feel in your body. And that, for me, was like a missing piece for a long time in my own personal work. Was like, okay, well, I'm talking a lot and I'm processing a lot, but I'm not doing anything with the rest of my body, who's I'm feeling like constricted and tight. And so,
So as far as meditation for you, what do you feel like is the, I mean, I know there's a variety of, you know, length and guided, not guided. Where do you think people should start? Like, what's your best advice as far as meditation? Is it quiet room? Is it
Yeah.
music? Is it not? Like, what's your best advice to just be able to hear yourself? Or is it just breathing? I don't
Yeah.
know.
If you there's a lot of people that feel like they don't want to do meditation because it makes them crawl up their skin, or they want to move while they do it. And so I teach nonlinear movement, which is like sort of like a moving meditation, but it's allowing your body to move in whatever way it
Yeah.
wants to move. So, I mean, even if you're listening to an app like the Calm app or Headspace, like get on all fours on a yoga mat and allow yourself to move if you feel like you can't lay there and
Yeah.
listen. But
Yeah.
even just a simple 5-minute meditation or guided meditation or music without words is a really good place to start.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 minutes a day
Perfect.
has better
I
benefits
love,
than like 1 hour once a week.
yeah, exactly. I love that you mentioned the nonlinear movement because I have found I'm getting older. And so stretching is really important. And I
Mm-hmm.
found listening to some meditation, just music, and getting on my yoga mat and just stretching however my body tells me to stretch. I have no plan. I just go whatever feels good. And I totally get that because that is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely makes you feel like I'm listening to myself, listening to my body, what it needs, and I'm just letting go of any agenda. I'm not following a routine, just going with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you brought that up because I've done that, not really
That's
intentionally, just
awesome.
loosen up in the morning. So I get
Yeah,
that. Very cool. I love that.
yeah,
You touched on this. You mentioned books and podcasts. Do you have kind of some favorites you always recommend to people as far as books? Let's start with
yeah.
that. What are your
Okay.
favorites that you love to recommend over and over again?
I
Do you
think
have some?
Untamed by Glennon Doyle was like the first book I read that was like, oh my gosh, I feel seen. Um,
Yes.
Untamed, The Wild Woman's Way by Michaela Boehm. Um, I love Sue Monk Kidd. She wrote The Dance of the Dissonant Daughter that also made me
Mm,
feel super seen. What other books have I read recently? The Body Keeps the Score or
yeah.
Chasing the Tiger by Peter Levine. It's also really good. I love, love, love The Wisdom of Your Body by Dr. Hilary McBride. That was
Okay.
another one that made me feel um, very seen and just awake to, wow, my body is a genius. Like my body has a voice, but I've kind of shut that part off for a long time and didn't
Sure.
listen. I'm probably blanking on so many good books that I love right now. The book Pussy by Regina Thompson. I can't even say her last name, but it is amazing. It is like
Okay.
a lot of. I wouldn't start with that one if you're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
hesitant. If you're new to this work, I
That's a
would.
build up
And
too. Yeah.
it's a build up too. I built up to that one because the first time
Yeah.
my friend was reading it, and I was like, no, that's not for me. And then I
Yeah.
finally was ready, and I picked it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this book!
Yeah.
I was ready for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm like looking at my
On your
desk right
bookshelf.
now to
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I know. I
Those are
have
it's a
so
great list.
yeah. Just follow
Yeah.
them. I just joined. What is it? Goodreads. So
Oh, yeah.
if you're on
Okay.
Goodreads, I have an
Yeah.
account there that I started saving some of the books that I recommend.
Perfect. I know. I love that. I love because I need it mentally just to track. Like, have I read this before? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then how about podcasts? Any favorite podcasts that like you're just into that you got on like you subscribe to that you're a regular listener to?
Yes. I think the longest podcast I've probably listened to is the Robcast, which is Rob
Oh, yeah.
Bell's
Yeah.
podcast. Love him.
Yep.
I also went through a period of time where I really listened to Fun Parts podcast, which is a
Okay.
podcast on purity culture
Okay.
and deconstructing that. I love Tantric Life or This Tantric Life with Layla Martin.
Mm.
I just started listening to that one. And I think that's it for right now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking of. Yeah.
Those are the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you obviously tuning in, this is a lot of femininity, divine feminine, those kinds of things that you've talked about a little bit earlier in the
Yeah.
books you're recommending. There's a
Mm-hmm.
few in there that sound like it's kind of tuned into that as well.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I came across you because of a gal that had gone on a recent trip with you. Tell us real
Yeah.
quickly about your trip you took to France recently, what you did, how
Mm-hmm.
this came about, this idea, and why. Why now?
Yeah. So the idea came about a couple years ago. I love to travel and um, I love girls' trips, and
Yeah.
I wanted to do more work with women in a group setting. And I thought, oh, why don't I just plan a retreat? Like, and so I did that. My first one was in Costa Rica last year, and that was so fun. And then I was reading this book, Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. Definitely highly recommend that one.
Okay.
Um, and I picked it up and started reading about Mary Magdalene, and I was like, I got to go to France. I got to go to where she lived after the crucifixion. And I didn't know this about her, and I didn't know this. And she is actually an archetype of the divine feminine, and there's a
Mm.
lot we don't know about her. There's a lot that was um, misconstrued and told about her in the church that actually isn't everything. And so
Yeah.
I thought, I want to go to this place in the south of France. I've always had a connection to it. And so I called my friend that is a women's trip planner, and she plans dreamy trips. And I said, could you help me plan this trip? And she's like, absolutely. And so we threw it together in like 3 months. And I just felt the call in my body and my mind. It
Mm-hmm.
lit me up. And I was like, I'm going to put it out there in a way that I've never put it out there before, where I'm just like trusting that the people that are going to come are the people that need to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to worry about not selling enough tickets or making enough money or whatever it was. I'm just like, I'm meant to go. And so I put it out there, and it really was down to like the last week of trying to sell it that the rest of the people came in,
I love it.
and
Yeah.
we were like, it's a go. And so it really was organic in that way. And then my mom and sister ended up coming, and it
Oh,
was
that's
just
awesome.
the most powerful healing experience for me and my family, for our feminine line.
Yeah.
And so we ended up just having such an amazing time connecting as women, doing experiential therapy, leading them in wonderful sacred places, finding this cave that actually is shaped like a yoni.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was
I saw
so
the pictures. It was so
powerful.
funny. Yeah. 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 So cool.
Yeah, which is her sacred place, which is where Mary is said to have lived the last 30 years of her life. And I can tell you by going there that it was a journey to find. A lot of people can't find it.
Yep.
And we found it. And when you walk into that cave, like, you feel the energy, you feel the divinity, and you feel it for yourself. And a lot of women had just beautiful moments of release and emotion and
Mhm.
joy and acceptance for who we are as women. And it was just, yeah, in that moment I was like, yeah, I'm meant to lead women here and
Yeah.
in this work. And so it was just, and then it's just fun and beautiful, and
Yeah.
just, just having so much, saturating yourself in the beauty and the pleasure of life is what turns us women on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you have something planned? I know we're airing this sometime in September, but are you planning anything coming up? What's your next? Do you have
Yes,
another trip going? Tell me about your next trips.
I do. I have a trip to Joshua Tree that is going to be a sort of like long weekend
Yeah.
retreat. And that's going to be at the end of September or early October. So those
Okay.
dates aren't set in stone yet. And then I'm also doing the same Divine Feminine retreat in Provence of next year, around the same time in May. And we've already booked this amazing chateau
Mm,
that we stay at as women, and we get a private chef, and we just get to have so much fun and
I
do
love
all of
it.
those healing things together as women, and to feel alive in our bodies and call in those things we want for our life. So I am going to do that one again as well.
I love it. I love it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I saw the list. Ooh, do I wait for the France one or do I just jump in the Joshua Tree? I'm like, I have it on my little bucket list as well. So I just
I
think that it
love
looks
it.
so amazing. I think anything you get women together and you do things like this,
Mhm.
it just for some reason I think it's the energy of it's an intention behind it. It's not just, hey, let's go to the beach and
Yeah.
have drinks and whatever all day. It's you, there's intention behind it and there's a purpose. And I love that. I think it
Mhm.
means so much more and you get so much more out of it
Yep.
and that kind of a girl's trip versus something else.
The transformation that you see from arrival to departure is
Yeah.
why I'm like, I've got to do this more. I mean, obviously I'm a mom and I can't leave my kids all the time, but I
Sure,
am like,
sure.
it lights me up so much to see the transformation of what can happen in 1 week. And that's
Yeah,
the beauty and the power of experiential therapy. So,
yeah,
literally, traveling and doing healing work with other women is life changing.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet for you as well, right? For you as well
Oh,
for them. I
every
mean,
time I change, every
right?
time I
Yeah.
learn something, every time I grow in some way, or I see myself
Um,
reflected in another woman, or I can hold space for another woman in a way that I'm like, oh, that felt so good. And I get to
yeah,
watch other women do that for each other.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Ugh,
beauty of it.
so powerful. And I think,
Mhm.
like you said, it's just enjoying being in the moment of life. And I think that's what Europe does so well, from what I've gathered. Never been, but they just enjoy life so thoroughly. There's no rocket ship to the top. There's no, I
Yeah.
shouldn't, not for everybody, but in general, the society feels like it's much more enjoy the day, sit here for 2 hours for lunch, be with your people, just enjoy
Mm.
life. And I think that's the one thing they have, right? And it sounds like
That
you guys got a
is,
chance to experience that a little bit when you were there.
we did. We just
Mm,
enjoyed our meals and sat there
yeah.
and ate oysters and drank wine, and we had
Yeah.
so much fun.
Conversation, I'm sure, was fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, what you needed.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's all it is. It's just having a great
Yeah,
conversation with a bunch of women. That's all you need.
totally.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So tell us, where can people find you? Like, if they want to work with you, if they want to be coached,
Yeah,
therapy, whatever, tell us how we can find you and where they can go.
sure. Yeah. You can find me on my website, ChrissyPowers.com. That's just
Hmm.
ChrissysPowers. And then
Hmm.
you can contact me through my website. You can see more of my offerings and how you can work with me there. Eventually, I'll be putting up where you can book those retreats.
Sure.
Probably the best way is to join my new email list,
Yep.
which you can do that through my website and also get a
Yep.
free meditation.
Yep. Perfect.
So I'm also on Instagram at Chrissy J Powers, and you can
Okay.
send me a DM if you want. Sometimes I miss those, but yeah, just follow me. You'll find more information
Okay.
on everything I offer, plus just free tips and things that are hopefully adding to people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me and work with me. I have an embodiment program I do with women. I'm also going to start or launch a group program as well in the next couple months. So if you're on my newsletter or email list,
Yeah.
you'll also be notified of that.
Perfect. Perfect.
Mhm.
And I'd like to always finish every episode with asking you a question. What is one thing right now that's making you feel awake, well, and empowered, which is what the acronym for OD is?
Yeah.
Anything that's doing it for you right now?
Hmm. Nature. I'm
Yeah.
really feeling like I need to be in nature more. And so
Yeah.
I'm making plans to go places where I leave my phone more
Yes.
and I get into nature, or I swim in a lake, or I get to touch a tree. So that's what's making me feel most awake right now.
Well, Chrissy, again, thank you so much for being here. I know you've time is was important to you, and I don't want to take any more time. But if down the road, I'm telling you, I think there's a lot more conversation to be had. But I just
I
thank you so much
love
for
that.
this one, and I think you've got such a great uh, message to give it to women about being in touch with their femininity and being in touch with who they are authentically. I think that's so
Yeah.
huge, especially I think for midlifers, especially because we've
Mhm.
had that programming that we didn't realize we were
Yeah.
adhering to. And I think the younger generations now have a much more sense of be who they are, and we can
Mhm.
learn a lot from them. But I just think that your work is so important. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for
Yeah.
showing up for my audience and being here to give us a
Oh,
little bit of a taste of what you do. And hopefully we'll have you on as another time. Would love to have
thank
you back on.
you. I would
Oh my
love that.
gosh.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
having me.
Thank you, Chrissy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye, sweetie.
Bye.
Thank you again for being here. I am so grateful for your time. And if you liked what you heard, please head to where you listen to podcasts, rate and review so we can be found by other people. Please share on Instagram, your social media channels, wherever else you go, so we can reach as many people as possible so they can meet these amazing women and hear these conversations. If you'd like to connect further, you can find me over at my website at halliesawyer.com or on Instagram. I'm usually going to be at Hallie_Sawyer or The Odd Life, which is this podcast's specific Instagram account. All right. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you soon.